Day that KTN is focusing on the Hands of Our Elephants campaign, and if you recall, just a short while ago an elite team was constituted to handle poaching in the country. That is the direction that we are all looking at tonight. Let me bring in KTN's Rita Tinina, who is at the Nairobi National Park. Rita.
Well, thank you very much, Linda. Now, there is growing concern about the future of Kenya's elephants. And for the custodian of the country's wildlife, the Kenya Wildlife Service, keeping the elephants safe does not come cheap. KWS is now reaching out to unfamiliar quarters. Take a look. At the Kenya Wildlife Service Law Enforcement Academy in Manyani, a practical lesson is underway.
Left, deploy left.
But this is not your usual training of Kenya Wildlife Service Rangers. 40 of the officers are drawn from the dreaded General Service Unit, 40 are from the Administration Police Unit, and another 40 are KWS Rangers. The 120 officers are part of an elite unit being prepared to deal with the increased threat of poaching.
And the need for it is to ensure that they provide us, Kenya Wildlife Service, a support towards covering the ground to enhance more patrols.
The move to bring the units into unfamiliar territory is part of unprecedented measures being undertaken to try and tame poaching and the illegal trade in ivory.
Kwa sababu tuko tayari kizazi kinachokuja kukosa kuona ndovu ama nyati kwa sababu wenyeji haramu.
The Kenya Wildlife Service has 2,800 rangers tasked with keeping an eye on wildlife in the country's 24 national parks, 29 national reserves and 5 sanctuaries.
We cover up to 8% of Kenya landmass, and that is a substantial amount of ground to cover by our rangers. So one of the challenges has to do with the numbers that we have.
KWS says it needs at least 5,000 more rangers to effectively play the role of guarding wildlife.
How do we collaborate with other agencies who are already deployed to provide security in this country? And by them, therefore, coming to support our operations in terms of fighting poaching and other incidences that pertains to wildlife crime, we are seeing a progress toward ensuring that we are able to cover the ground effectively.
With easy access to weapons by poachers, analysts say rangers will need to up their game to effectively deal with the threat of poaching. Protecting the country's wildlife has come at a price to rangers, the ultimate price. This year, 2 rangers have died, their lives taken away by the poacher's bullet. But as KWS seeks new strategies to deal with poaching, it has come under pressure from critics who accuse some officers of colluding with poachers and ivory smugglers.
And a number of them have since been asked to take leave so that the investigation can take place.
Here at the Nairobi National Park, we can now bring in Paul Muya. He is the deputy spokesman of the Kenya Wildlife Service. Thank you so much for joining us. Just picking up from that piece that went on air, the interagency collaboration that we are seeing, of course, part of a framework that the country has undertaken to implement just to get out of the Gang of 8. What other measures are in that framework?
There are 5 thematic areas that were developed within the framework that we provided to CITES after being branded within the Gang of 8. Now, this has to do with registration and policy. Already there are progress on that front. We have seen Parliament, already the bill has been presented to Parliament as it were. The other area has to do with our inter-agency collaboration internally with other law enforcement agencies. Within, for example, we have the Kenya Police on board, Kenya Revenue Authority, Kenya Ports Authority, among others. These are stakeholders that have been brought on board to ensure that we share and build on the synergies that are already in place. We also have an element to do with awareness, so that we are able to provide outreach programs to communities and every other person and our stakeholders, so that we can build on the information and awareness, as well as ensuring that people appreciate the value of wildlife, as it were. We also have an element to do with how do we, therefore, every other year provide a framework for reporting to CITES. So these are the 5 mechanisms that are already provided for within the framework.
When it comes to enforcement, 2,800 rangers covering 8% of the country's landmass. Isn't that too low? What's the problem? How come we have so few?
The challenge has to do with a number of factors. Of course, the service is suffering from attrition on the part of the staff. We have factors to do with the people who are resigning from the service, other people die and all that. For example, this year we have lost 2 rangers in contact with the poachers. Now, these are some of the factors that contribute to the numbers of our capacity, therefore, being reduced over time. Remember, we also have a challenge with how the frequency at which we can recruit and deploy the Rangers force. Now, for instance, the last time we had this recruitment was in year 2010. So over time, we have been building capacity despite the fact that we are also facing challenges of these attritions.
Apart from training, let's talk something about welfare. There have been accusations that some rangers or officers from KWS are colluding with the poachers. What's the problem? Is it that their welfare is not well taken care of? Is it that the poachers are giving them a better deal?
Not exactly. The issues at play has to do with how are we able to communicate the matters that are at play within the service, as it were. So we have already made it public that there are a number of our officers who are suspected to be engaged in malpractice, probably colluding with poachers and all that. But these are mere allegations. Already the process to ensure that the culprits are brought to book are underway. So investigation has to take place. We have to ensure that there are facts, and this evidence is what will be provided for whether to ensure that we sack them or not. Now, we cannot therefore say holistically that our Rangers force are colluding with poachers, as it were, because at the moment we have Rangers who are dedicating their life. In fact, we have already seen a number of them losing their life. So we cannot therefore condemn them by virtue of having just a few being suspected of colluding with poachers, as it were.
In terms of conservation, what incentive is there for communities that live near the parks, some that live on the migratory corridors? I mean, if an elephant destroyed my crops, why should I ensure that it is safe? If a lion kills my goats, why shouldn't I kill it?
We need to start connecting the dots from the value of wildlife. We would appreciate that tourism in this country is wildlife-based. In fact, it is indicated that about up to 70% of it is wildlife-based, bringing a lot of revenue to our government and our country, and therefore growing the economy, as it were. So that means then each one of us has a duty and a responsibility of ensuring that we protect the heritage that we already have, that is God-given. Now, what we are doing to communities that are living on the peripheries of protected areas is to ensure that there are incentives and programs that are geared towards ensuring that they benefit directly from benefits that are wildlife related. Already there are programs. For instance, we have a program to do with enterprise development, ensuring that communities are able to establish wildlife-based enterprises by way of providing seed capital. This seed capital ensures that the enterprises that community are engaged in is able to generate revenue, and therefore they can accrue benefit directly. Beside that, we're also providing conservation education and awareness, so that people are, beside those people who are living on the peripheries of protected areas, and everybody else for that matter, is able to appreciate the values. And these values accrues benefit not just to them, but to people across this country.
Do you think that message is sinking in?
It is. We have received a lot of support. For instance, it's indicative of the number of information, the volume of information that we are receiving from members of the public on instances of poaching that is happening across the country. Remember, we are thinly spread. And all the arrests that we have made, including the seizures that are happening in our seaport and our airports, is a result of the collaboration and the support that we are receiving from members of the public.
Okay, thank you so much. We have been speaking to Paul Moya. He is the Deputy Spokesman for the Kenya Wildlife Service. Of course, we have been coming to you live from the Impala Point inside the Nairobi National Park. This is the only park in the world, of course, in close proximity to a capital city. For now, I hand things back to James Matt and Linda in studio.
Well, thank you very much, Richard, Nina. And let's keep at this conversation and let's put the pace to this conversation. I'm now joined by Benson Cheng, who's an environmental lawyer. Benson, who's on our town studio. Benson, thank you very much for making time to talk to us this evening.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, Benson, thank you very much. Now, let's start off with this Wildlife Bill 2013, Benson, and it's been touted as our only hope, the only hope we have against this menace or madness, if you like. But can I point out to you that this bill also contains such provisions as canning or pruning or cropping, if you like, that we can decide as a nation at some point that we have enough of this, species of animals, and we can decide to, kill some. And my question to you is, how good is this Wildlife Bill 2013?
Is a very interesting thing when you say that this is our only hope. It is actually wishful thinking to think that a bill or a law can solve the kind of monumentous problem that we have in wildlife poaching. But it's an important step, really, because law and policy are very critical in dealing with the kind of problems that we are seeing in the wildlife sector. I think the bill is an important starting point. It makes very critical departure from where we are coming from, a situation where we thought that the government was all-knowing and could do everything to deal with these problems. That is a good step forward, knowing that the stakeholders all have a piece to contribute, and particularly that the local communities have a role to play.
Benson, having mentioned that, stakeholders, and let's bring in this conversation of, we do know where this, the elephant ivory, where it's heading to, honestly. It's not going to the US, it's not going to Australia, it is going to China. Why are we afraid to say that, Benson?
Well, part of it is in international diplomacy. Really, you don't jump the queue and just accuse another country or a region of the world in these kind of matters. It involves a lot of stakes too, because the kind of problem that we are dealing with is a very complex one. You are dealing with international borders, and we know very well that when it comes to that, diplomacy is very critical, because the borders are very porous, and monitoring those and enforcing them at national level and international level can be very tricky. So countries are bound to be very diplomatic in the way they handle these things. You can't accuse a country before you have the evidence that really that particular country is involved. These people are criminals, and probably the countries like China, where this is going to, are as concerned as we are. That's the bottom line.
All right, Benson, just my final question then is, today, if you or myself commits a traffic offense, we will pay so much more than a fellow who's been caught or nabbed trying to, take away ivory or one of these, wildlife, So just the question is, just how serious are we even in terms of our laws, stringent laws, in terms of just saying that we are serious as a country, whether this is going to another country or not. We are serious that if you're caught, with wildlife or anything that we consider that's a national treasure, that indeed you will be, the penalty is huge and it's serious.
Law enforcement is very critical here, but a wrong assumption is always made that when you have stringent penalties, then you necessarily deal with the problem. Far be that from the truth. And particularly when you are dealing with a complex issue like wildlife poaching. Big penalties or high penalties don't necessarily translate to good enforcement. What we need to do as a country, definitely we need to look at the kind of penalties we give. And what we have had in our previous laws, the Wildlife and Management and Conservation Act, have been pretty low. What we are proposing could be too high and not commensurate with the crimes that we are talking about. What is important is not always about the high penalty. It is about the propensity that an offender will be caught. If today a citizen knew that it is 99% chance they will be caught when they commit a certain offense, even if the fine was just 3,000 shillings, most probably you will deal with the problem than if there is only 1 in 1,000 chances that you will be caught. It doesn't matter, even if it is death penalty, because more people are going to take the chance. But all these questions of high penalty is good politically, and maybe it is also good to show the people that we are really serious about it. But we need to go many steps further, and particularly dealing with issues of policing, bringing the communities to be part of that process, and ensuring that the institutions collaborate well enough without intrigues and shenanigans towards a common goal. And particularly one last issue, we need to deal with the corruption in the sector, because for every act of this kind, it needs an insider. And that, I think, is principally where the problem lies in this country about the issue of poaching.
Absolutely. Benson Ocheng, environmental lawyer, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure picking your brains and thoughts on this issue that we've been discussing at KTN in the last 2 days, and we continue with that. Well,